I froze when Nathan Blake slammed the folder onto the table, his eyes scanning the room like a predator satisfied with the chaos he caused. "This mistake is on you, Maya," he said, his voice calm, almost smug, as if he had rehearsed this moment. Every head turned toward me. Whispers spread like wildfire. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, to scream that I hadn't done anything wrong, but my throat locked. My hands were trembling, fingers gripping the edge of the table until they hurt. The report he threw down wasn't mine to blame. It was a system error, something I had warned him about weeks ago. The way everyone looked at me, expectant, judging, felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Time slowed. I noticed the slight curl of Nathan's lips, the satisfaction in his posture, and the way he avoided eye contact with the real culprit. I wanted to disappear. Instead, I took a deep breath, forced my face into a neutral mask, and nodded because tears in public meant weakness. My mind raced. Every email, every warning I had sent, every conversation now mattered more than ever. I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Nathan had made a mistake underestimating me, and the moment I got home, I would begin the work that would expose him completely. My name is Maya Sinclair, 32 years old, and this was the moment my patience turned into strategy. I returned to my desk, my fingers still shaking, the whispers trailing behind me like shadows I couldn't escape. Nathan sat across the room, pretending calm, checking his phone, acting as if nothing had happened, but I saw the subtle twitch in his jaw, the way his eyes flicked toward me, sharp and calculating. I opened my email and started reviewing the files I had sent earlier, noting every date, every approval, every message that proved I had warned about the error weeks before. Each timestamp was a tiny weapon I had quietly collected, building an unbreakable chain. I saved them all into a folder labeled Nathan's Oversight, careful to back it up privately. I watched him from the corner of my eye as he leaned back, smirking slightly, thinking the damage was done. I knew better. This wasn't about emotion. This was about evidence. While he believed charm could protect him, I understood truth was stronger, invisible yet undeniable when it hit at the right moment. I went over the report line by line, marking every mistake that wasn't mine, every misstep he tried to pin on me, every comment from colleagues that subtly contradicted his claims. My pulse slowed as I focused. Each file, each proof, each step I documented became part of a strategy Nathan couldn't anticipate. The room felt heavy with unspoken tension. This wasn't revenge yet. It was preparation. And he didn't know that by the time he thought he had won, he would already have lost. At lunch, I sat quietly at my usual spot, but the room felt different, like the air itself had shifted. Nathan passed by, nodding at a few colleagues, ignoring me entirely, his smug grin still intact for everyone else to see. I pretended not to notice, my salad untouched as I opened my private folder on my laptop. Every email I had ever sent about the project, every warning I had issued, every detail Nathan tried to bury was organized and ready. My heart raced, but my face stayed calm. A coworker slid into the seat across from me. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, glancing at Nathan. I smiled faintly, keeping my tone neutral. "I'll be fine. Just focused." Focused meant calculating, preparing, plotting without a single word being spoken. I reviewed the timeline again, noticing patterns I hadn't fully seen before. Every time Nathan tried to shift blame, he left a trail, tiny cracks in his story that only careful attention could reveal. I highlighted each discrepancy, labeling it, noting who had seen it and when. By the time my break ended, I had a clear sequence forming, Nathan's arrogance mapped out in black and white. No one could argue with facts. The power shift had started quietly, invisibly, but it had begun. Nathan thought I was defeated, humiliated, and silent. He had no idea the record I was building would become a mirror reflecting every lie he told, and the moment it shattered, he wouldn't know what hit him. The afternoon meeting started, and Nathan strutted in, confident, like nothing had happened, like I was invisible. He smiled at the team, tossing phrases about responsibility and accountability, and for a moment, I almost laughed at how clearly he thought he controlled the room. I sat back, my notebook open, fingers ready to type everything I saw, heard, and could prove later. As he spoke, I noticed the small things, the way his voice wavered slightly when he referred to the missing report, The slight hesitation before he answered a question from a senior manager, the flicker of doubt in his eyes he tried to hide. I kept my gaze neutral, but inside, I catalogued every nuance, every pause, every misstep. My files on my laptop were ready, every email, every approval, every warning. As he tried to deflect blame onto the vendor, I noted the date of my emails showing I had already predicted the issue and warned him explicitly. A junior team member asked a question Nathan clearly wasn't expecting, and I quietly prepared to show the exact correspondence that would expose his false narrative if needed. Nathan caught my eye for a brief second, a micro-expression of irritation flashing across his face before his smile returned. I didn't react. I typed silently, recording each detail. Every word, every glance, every hesitation became ammunition. By the end of the meeting, Nathan left thinking he had survived unscathed. I knew better. The first move had been documented, and the game was officially on. Back at my desk, I opened my email again, scrolling through messages I had already saved, just to make sure nothing was missing. Nathan had sent a follow-up, polite on the surface but heavy with implication, suggesting I take responsibility for something I hadn't done. I clicked the reply button but didn't type. Instead, I saved the email, adding it to the Nathan's Oversight folder. Every message, every subtle manipulation, every attempt to rewrite history was now neatly organized, time-stamped and ready. I glanced at him across the room, talking animatedly with the new hire he favored, every laugh, and not a reminder of how carefully he controlled perception. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the frustration settle into something sharper, more strategic. I wasn't reacting anymore, I was preparing. Each task he tried to pin on me became part of the evidence I would use to show the truth. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, typing notes silently, connecting dots he thought no one would notice. The office felt smaller. Every sound amplified the clack of keyboards, the whisper of conversations, Nathan's confident voice. I watched him hand the new hire a file I had created, his pride in passing off my work evident. I noted it, saved it, filed it, knowing one day it would be a crucial piece. I took a breath, steadying myself. The room might think Nathan was in control, but he had no idea the foundation of his arrogance was already documented, fragile, and ready to collapse. Later that afternoon, a minor system glitch popped up, something Nathan had ignored for weeks, and of course, the blame started whispering toward me before anyone even asked. I stayed calm, taking slow breaths, watching him twitch slightly as he tried to look helpful but failed. His phone buzzed constantly, and he glanced at it nervously, clearly realizing he hadn't planned for this. I opened my files, found the exact warning I had sent 3 weeks ago, and made a mental note of the date and time. I didn't speak immediately. I let Nathan fumble, let him direct the team, let him make the mistake of thinking he could manage without me. Then I stepped in. Calmly, precisely. I showed the steps to fix the issue, noting each adjustment and referencing the emails he had ignored. The team watched silently. Nathan's jaw tightened. He said nothing, clearly uncomfortable that the solution wasn't his. I didn't boast. I documented. I updated my folder with screenshots, timestamps, and a short note about his reaction, knowing it mattered more than anyone's opinion in the moment. By the time the system was back online, Nathan had tried to take credit, but the record in my files was clear. Every decision I made, every step I took was saved. I leaned back slightly, letting him think he had survived the embarrassment, not realizing that each small victory I quietly documented was a brick in the wall that would eventually trap him. By the end of the day, Nathan was fuming quietly, pretending calm while his hands tapped on the desk with barely concealed irritation. I watched him from across the room, keeping my expression neutral, my fingers hovering over my laptop as I typed detailed notes. Every misstep, every small exaggeration he made to cover his lack of foresight, every glance he shot toward me filled the pages. I labeled each one, stored them meticulously, backed them up, and made sure nothing could be altered or lost. He called a quick meeting with the new hire, praising effort that had actually come from me, and I silently documented it all. The way Nathan leaned back in his chair, puffed his chest slightly, believed he was untouchable, it was all there in black and white. No one could argue with facts. I didn't need to confront him, I just watched. Later, a colleague asked me a question about the project, hesitating as if afraid Nathan would overhear. I answered politely, subtly referencing the original timeline I had created, letting the facts speak instead of emotions. Nathan's eyes flicked toward us briefly, catching the subtle shift, but he didn't understand it yet. Each moment he acted arrogantly. Each assumption he made that I wouldn't notice, that no one else would notice, was being carefully saved. Every file I stored, every screenshot I took, every note I wrote was one step closer to revealing the truth. By quitting reaction and embracing preparation, I was slowly winning the war without him realizing it. The next morning, the tension in the office was palpable. Nathan walked in with a forced smile, checking his phone every few seconds, pretending he hadn't lost ground yesterday. I watched silently, my fingers folded on the desk, my files ready. The new hire sat nervously beside him, unsure how to act, clearly caught between Nathan's misplaced confidence and the facts everyone could now sense. A manager asked a pointed question about a missed milestone, and Nathan hesitated. I didn't intervene yet. I let him stumble, letting the record reflect his uncertainty. Each pause, each vague answer, each shrug was now another piece of evidence in my growing timeline. I opened my folder quietly, reviewing the emails I had meticulously saved, timestamps lining up perfectly with every step of the project, every warning I had given that Nathan had ignored. He glanced at me for a fraction of a second, an almost imperceptible twitch in his mouth, like he knew I was watching, but he couldn't stop it. I smiled faintly to myself, calm, unshaken, letting the momentum build quietly. During the team discussion, Nathan tried to redirect attention, but I subtly referenced the original approvals and instructions in my notes without calling him out, letting the evidence speak. By the end of the meeting, his confident facade was cracking, though he didn't realize it. Every misstep he made was now documented, undeniable, and ready to expose the arrogance he had relied on for far too long. The game was moving forward exactly as I planned. By mid-morning, the office atmosphere had shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, but I noticed it instantly. Nathan tried to command attention during a brief check-in, his voice slightly sharper than usual, but the team's focus drifted toward me, glances flicking as if searching for clarity. I stayed calm, hands folded on the desk, letting him speak, letting him flounder. Every vague answer, every over-explained justification, every attempt to sound in control became another entry in my growing record. My private folder was open, filled with emails, screenshots, and notes, each perfectly timed to match the moments of Nathan's misdirection. A minor error cropped up in the new hires report, something I had flagged weeks earlier. Nathan's face tightened. He leaned in, trying to smooth it over, but the team hesitated, sensing the discrepancy. I didn't say a word. I simply typed a note, recording every glance, every hesitation, every half-hearted explanation. Later, Nathan approached me quietly, pretending to ask for advice, trying to regain a sense of authority. I smiled politely, guided him to the original timeline I had created, pointing out the documented steps. He thanked me curtly, avoiding eye contact. Every detail, every reaction, every attempt to reclaim control was now captured. The cracks were spreading quietly, methodically. Nathan had believed he controlled perception, that no one would notice his manipulation, but I had every move cataloged. The office was starting to see the shift. He thought he was untouchable, but I had already begun dismantling his illusion, one carefully documented step at a time. By lunch, Nathan's arrogance was starting to falter. A client issue popped up, something I had anticipated and documented weeks ago, but he tried to take control, sending a vague email that only added confusion. I waited, calm, letting him overreach, letting his assumptions guide him into another mistake. I opened my folder quietly, cross-referencing dates, emails, and previous warnings, making sure every step was perfectly recorded. When he glanced at me for guidance, I offered nothing more than a polite nod. He tried to spin the situation in a quick hallway conversation with the team, but I silently noted every word, every attempt to rewrite the facts. Later, in a brief team huddle, he claimed responsibility for a fix I had already completed. I didn't interrupt. I only updated my timeline, placing timestamps and emails beside his words, letting the record do the talking. Each glance, each hesitation, Each attempt to redirect attention became a permanent part of my documentation. By mid-afternoon, Nathan was visibly stressed, checking emails constantly, trying to regain a sense of control. The new hire looked nervous, unsure where loyalty should lie. I stayed composed, quietly reviewing the chain of evidence, ensuring nothing was missing, nothing could be challenged. Every move Nathan made now strengthened my position, even when he didn't realize it. By the time the office emptied, I had added another detailed entry, proving that his so-called leadership was fragile, flawed, and entirely dependent on me stepping in. The long game was moving forward exactly as I intended. That afternoon, I noticed the first real sign of doubt spreading. During a brief progress meeting, Nathan tried to explain a missed deadline using vague language and half-truths. I stayed silent, letting him stumble, letting the team notice the cracks themselves. A colleague furrowed their brow, glanced at me, then back at Nathan. I leaned slightly forward, keeping my expression neutral, knowing every subtle reaction was now part of the record. When he attempted to redirect blame to a vendor, I didn't speak. Instead, I silently opened my timeline on the laptop, checking dates and emails, ensuring every warning I had sent was properly noted. Nathan's confidence was visibly shaking, though he didn't realize it. I documented the moment meticulously, saving screenshots of his messages, noting the subtle flinch when a senior manager questioned him. Later, he approached me under the guise of needing clarification, pretending to seek advice. I guided him politely to the documented steps, letting him believe he had received help without realizing I was cementing the proof of his missteps. Each interaction, each attempt to regain control, was another entry in the timeline, another brick in the wall I was quietly building. By the end of the day, Nathan avoided eye contact with me, pacing in small circles, muttering excuses. The office atmosphere had shifted. People were starting to sense the truth. He thought he controlled perception, but the reality was slowly, methodically, unmistakably slipping away from him. The long game was unfolding exactly as I planned. By late morning, the tension in the office was almost tangible. Nathan entered the team room, attempting to project confidence, but his stride was slightly off, his eyes flicking nervously toward me. I stayed seated calm, letting him speak first, letting his words reveal the cracks he couldn't hide. He started presenting updates on a critical milestone, exaggerating progress that wasn't real. I didn't interrupt. I silently opened my timeline, cross-referencing each claim with saved emails, approval notes, and screenshots. Every false statement was cataloged, every misstep marked and backed with proof. The new hire stuttered, unsure how to respond, clearly sensing the shift in the room. Nathan glanced at him, then toward me, but he didn't understand the subtle dominance I had already established through meticulous preparation. Later, a manager asked a detailed question about the milestones timeline. Nathan faltered, fumbling for an explanation. I provided a polite clarification, referencing exact dates and approvals I had archived. His jaw tightened, fingers gripping the edge of the table, and I documented it all quietly, knowing leadership was noticing. By mid-afternoon, Nathan was sending rapid emails, checking his phone every few minutes, his control slipping. I kept typing, recording every interaction, every subtle reaction, every failed attempt to assert authority. Each entry built the narrative he thought he could manipulate, and each detail made it undeniable. By the time the day ended, Nathan avoided me entirely, retreating to his office, unaware that the pattern of his unraveling had been fully captured. The long game was in motion, and he had already fallen into the trap. By the next morning, Nathan's unease was impossible to ignore. He arrived early, checking his phone repeatedly, pretending calm while the tension around him thickened. I stayed at my desk, quietly organizing my timeline, every email, message, and note perfectly cataloged. A sudden technical issue arose on the client side, something minor but critical. Nathan immediately tried to take charge, sending rushed instructions to the team, but I noticed the gaps in his logic. I didn't intervene yet. Instead, I silently prepared the correct sequence of actions, ensuring the proof of his errors would be clear. A colleague came to me privately, whispering, "Didn't you flag this last week?" I nodded silently, recording the interaction, making mental notes for the timeline. Nathan glanced over, unaware of what was happening. During the team check-in, He attempted to explain the mistake as an unforeseen complication, but I calmly presented the documented solution I had prepared in advance, showing every warning he had ignored. Leadership paused, reading the proof without my commentary. Nathan's face tightened, jaw clenching, eyes darting nervously. By mid-morning, he was sending frantic emails, trying to regain credibility, but each one contradicted the meticulously saved facts. I added every message to my master folder. By lunch, whispers spread subtly, colleagues now questioning inconsistencies themselves, no one daring to confront him aloud. Nathan thought he controlled perception, but every move he made now strengthened the record against him. The long game was unfolding flawlessly, and he didn't even realize he was losing. By mid-afternoon, Nathan's composure was cracking. A client escalated an issue he had promised to resolve days ago, and the team looked to him for guidance. He hesitated, fingers drumming on the table, glancing at me as if seeking backup. I stayed silent, hands folded, letting him flounder while mentally noting every misstep. He started giving vague instructions, contradicting his own earlier emails. I opened my folder quietly, double-checking the timeline, making sure every previous warning, every approval, every documented concern was perfectly aligned. Nathan tried to cover the discrepancy by leaning on the new hire, giving him authority in front of the team, but I observed closely, knowing each subtle reaction was adding weight to the record. Later, Nathan pulled me aside under the pretense of asking for clarification, pretending this was a collaborative discussion. I guided him politely to the exact emails and dates, letting him think he had gained insight, unaware that I was cementing the proof of his negligence. Every glance, every hesitation, every attempt to regain control was recorded silently, meticulously. By late afternoon, Nathan was visibly stressed, checking his inbox obsessively, muttering under his breath, trying to fix what he had already failed to control. Colleagues were beginning to notice the shift in authority, their questions directed more toward me than him. I stayed calm, adding every observation to the master folder. The trap had been set, and the pattern of his unraveling was undeniable, unfolding exactly as I had planned. By the next morning, the office energy had shifted. Nathan arrived with forced confidence, checking his phone every few minutes, trying to appear in control, but the subtle tension around him was undeniable. I stayed at my desk, reviewing my master timeline, ensuring every detail from emails, approvals, and missteps was in perfect order. A sudden client request popped up, urgent and complex, something Nathan had overlooked. He rushed to address it, sending instructions that contradicted earlier communications. I quietly prepared the correct solution, documenting each of his errors in real time, making sure the evidence was undeniable. During the team call, Nathan attempted to assert authority, but I calmly presented the timeline, showing the sequence of events clearly, every email, message, and approval supporting the record. Leadership paused, reading the documentation, their expressions shifting subtly. Nathan's face tightened, jaw clenching, a slight tremor in his hands betraying his panic. By mid-morning, he was sending rapid emails to cover gaps, each one now conflicting with the documented proof I had carefully compiled. Colleagues started looking toward me for clarification, subtly acknowledging where the real control and knowledge lay. Nathan tried to regain credibility, leaning on charm, but it fell flat. By lunch, the whispers had started, questions, quiet observations, glances exchanged. Each one added to the mounting awareness that his authority was now fragile. I stayed composed, adding every detail to the timeline, every misstep logged, building a record that would be impossible to refute. The long game was in full swing, and Nathan was already trapped unaware. By mid-afternoon, Nathan's panic was becoming obvious. During a status meeting, he attempted to present progress on a project milestone, speaking quickly, trying to gloss over missed deadlines and unclear instructions. I stayed silent, letting him stumble, observing every hesitation, every slip, every contradictory statement. A senior manager raised a pointed question about timing, and Nathan flinched, searching for an answer. I quietly referenced my timeline, prepared in advance, noting the exact emails and approvals he had ignored. The room went silent as I calmly clarified the correct sequence, letting the facts speak without emotion. Nathan's jaw tightened, his fingers drumming nervously on the table, his eyes flicking to the team, realizing he was losing control. After the meeting, he approached me privately under the pretense of collaboration, asking for guidance. I offered polite assistance while mentally noting every interaction, every moment of hesitation, every acknowledgement of his mistakes. By late afternoon, he was sending hurried messages, trying to reassert authority, but each one contradicted the documented record I had built over weeks. Colleagues began glancing at me before asking questions, subtly recognizing who held the real knowledge. Nathan tried to regain composure, leaning on charm, but it no longer worked. The office atmosphere had shifted. Respect, subtly and quietly, was moving away from him. I updated the master timeline, every email, message, and reaction archived meticulously. The pattern of his unraveling was now undeniable, and the long game I had patiently orchestrated was reaching its critical phase. By the next morning, Nathan's tension was almost visible in the air. He arrived early, attempting a calm demeanor, but his hands trembled slightly as he sorted through his inbox, glancing at me more than once. I stayed at my desk, quietly reviewing my timeline, every email, message, and document perfectly organized. A sudden client escalation appeared, minor but urgent, and Nathan immediately tried to delegate without fully understanding the issue. I observed, making mental notes, preparing the documented sequence that would expose every oversight. During the team call, he spoke quickly, contradicting prior emails, creating confusion. I stayed calm, silently compiling screenshots and notes in real time, capturing every error. Leadership asked a precise question about the milestone, and Nathan stumbled, fumbling for an answer. I calmly clarified, referencing exact emails, approvals, and timelines I had saved, letting the facts speak. The room shifted subtly, colleagues exchanging glances, realizing the gap between perception and reality. Nathan's face tightened, jaw clenching, confidence draining with every moment. Later, he approached me privately, pretending to seek collaboration, but I noted every word, every hesitant glance, every forced smile, adding it to the master record. By mid-afternoon, whispers started, subtle questions from team members who had previously stayed silent. Nathan's charm failed to mask the unraveling. I continued documenting everything meticulously, every misstep, every contradiction, every faltering explanation. The trap I had set was now visible in small, undeniable cracks, and Nathan remained oblivious. By the end of the day, the long game had shifted entirely in my favor, and he was already losing. By mid-morning, the first major twist appeared. A client complaint surfaced. One Nathan had assured leadership was resolved last week, but it had quietly escalated overnight. He scrambled, sending rapid instructions to the team, but the timeline I had built exposed every misstep. I quietly prepared the proper solution, capturing every flawed step he attempted, archiving it in real time. During the emergency meeting, Nathan tried to present himself as in control, explaining the escalation with practiced confidence, but his story clashed with documented evidence I displayed calmly. Leadership leaned in, reading the emails, approvals, and prior warnings, realizing the full scope of his negligence. I observed Nathan's jaw tighten, his hands clenched subtly, eyes darting nervously, trying to regain composure. Midway through, he attempted to deflect responsibility onto a junior team member, but I already had a documented record proving the correct delegation chain. The room fell silent as I methodically presented the sequence, every date, message, and approval perfectly aligned. Colleagues exchanged knowing glances, subtle nods toward me, recognizing who truly controlled the project. Nathan's charm no longer worked. Facts spoke louder than his bravado. Later, he approached me privately, under the guise of collaboration, but I noted every word, every hesitation, every micro-expression, archiving it meticulously. By afternoon, whispers had spread through the office, questions softly directed toward me, trust shifting subtly. Nathan's panic grew as he realized control was slipping. The trap I had built months ago was no longer invisible, it was alive, undeniable, and the long game had entered its most dangerous, thrilling phase. By mid-afternoon, Nathan's unraveling accelerated. During a team briefing, he attempted to claim progress on a milestone he had barely touched, speaking faster than usual, trying to impress leadership. I stayed calm, observing his every gesture, the slight tremor in his hands, the way he avoided eye contact with senior managers. When a question came about a decision made last week, Nathan fumbled, contradicting an email chain I had meticulously saved. I quietly projected the exact sequence of approvals and communications, letting the facts speak without raising my voice. The room went silent. Colleagues shifted subtly, glances exchanged, recognizing the truth in front of them. Nathan's face tightened, lips pressed thin, confidence evaporating visibly. After the meeting, he tried a private conversation, pretending to strategize, asking for guidance. I answered politely, recording every hesitation, every micro-expression, every slip of tone. Later, a junior team member asked for clarification on the process Nathan had outlined incorrectly. I calmly explained, citing documented evidence, ensuring the record reflected accuracy without confrontation. Nathan hovered nearby, muttering under his breath, checking emails, trying to cover the missteps he had already made public. By evening, whispers had spread subtly through the office. I answered politely, recording every hesitation, every micro-expression, every slip of tone. Later, a junior team member asked for clarification on the process Nathan had outlined incorrectly. I calmly explained, citing documented evidence, ensuring the record reflected accuracy without confrontation. Nathan hovered nearby, muttering under his breath, checking emails, trying to cover the missteps he had already made public. By evening, whispers had spread subtly through the office. Nathan's arrogance had set the stage for his downfall, and I sat quietly, methodical, patient, knowing the crescendo of exposure was imminent, the final twists approaching, and his defeat was now only a matter of time. By the following morning, tension hung thick in the office. Nathan arrived, his usual confident stride replaced by a rigid, measured pace, eyes flicking nervously to my desk. I sat calmly, reviewing the master timeline, every email, every approval, every misstep meticulously documented, ready for the moment the full truth would surface. A senior manager requested an urgent review of project milestones, and Nathan tried to assert authority, speaking quickly, glossing over inconsistencies. I projected the timeline, every email and approval perfectly sequenced, exposing contradictions without raising my voice. Leadership leaned forward, their expressions sharp, noticing the gap between his claims and the documented reality. Nathan's face flushed, jaw tight, a subtle tremor in his hands. Later, he attempted to regain composure by sending clarifying emails, but each message conflicted with the chain of evidence I had compiled. During a private discussion, he tried to pressure me into offering assistance, but I answered politely, archiving every word, every hesitation, every forced smile, reinforcing the timeline. By mid-afternoon, whispers traveled quietly among colleagues. Questions now came to me first, subtle acknowledgments of authority shifting. Nathan's charm had completely failed. Control was slipping through his fingers. I updated the timeline, meticulously logging each interaction, email and micro-expression. The long game I had orchestrated for months was now accelerating toward its climax. Nathan's unraveling was no longer subtle. It was evident to anyone paying attention. The stage was set for the final acts, for the exposure that would confirm my strategy had worked perfectly, quietly, methodically, and irreversibly. By mid-morning, the office felt different. Nathan tried to assert control, walking past desks with forced confidence, but colleagues avoided eye contact, whispering quietly as they passed. I stayed at my desk, reviewing the master timeline, every email, every approval, every subtle misstep he had made meticulously catalogued. A sudden request came from leadership, a full review of last month's project updates with original documentation required. Nathan froze, glancing at me, his eyes betraying panic he tried to hide. I calmly opened the folder I had prepared months earlier, every timestamp, email, and approval perfectly organized. During the review meeting, Nathan attempted to explain progress, claiming oversight where none existed. I presented the documented sequence, letting the facts speak, showing the exact moments he ignored warnings, delegated improperly, and misrepresented milestones. The room went silent. Colleagues exchanged glances, subtle nods toward me, recognizing the accuracy of my record. Nathan's face tightened, fingers drumming nervously on the table, jaw pressed thin, confidence evaporating. After the meeting, he tried approaching me privately, pretending to strategize, but I answered politely while mentally noting every hesitation, every forced smile, adding it to the timeline. By mid-afternoon, leadership was quietly discussing discrepancies, questions now aimed directly at Nathan, forcing him into defensive explanations that contradicted my records. The long game had reached its turning point. Every misstep Nathan had made, every error he had thought hidden, was now exposed in undeniable detail. I stayed calm, methodical, patient, knowing the final payoff was near and his fall was inevitable. By late morning, Nathan's panic became obvious to anyone paying attention. A leadership call had him fumbling through updates, contradicting himself repeatedly, glances flicking nervously to me as I stayed calm, reviewing the master timeline silently. A senior manager asked a pointed question about a client milestone Nathan had claimed was on track. I projected the sequence of emails, approvals, and notes showing the exact missteps he had made. The room went quiet. Nathan's face tightened, lips pressed thin, hands trembling slightly. Colleagues exchanged glances, whispers traveling silently across the office, recognizing the truth I had documented. Later, a junior teammate approached, hesitantly asking clarifying questions Nathan had misrepresented. I answered carefully, citing exact messages and dates, ensuring the record reflected accuracy without confrontation. Nathan hovered nearby, muttering under his breath, checking emails, sending frantic messages, every movement captured in my timeline. By mid-afternoon, leadership privately requested a full copy of my documentation. Nathan realized too late the depth of the record I had built. Every contradiction, every omission, every failed claim was now irrefutable. The office had shifted subtly, people no longer deferred to him. His charm, once an effective shield, had failed entirely. I continued adding to the timeline, every interaction, every slip, every hesitation meticulously noted. The trap I had crafted was no longer theoretical, it was alive, undeniable and imminent. Nathan's fall was no longer avoidable. The moment of poetic justice was approaching, quiet, methodical, and complete, and I sat back, calm, knowing months of patience and strategy were about to deliver the final, irreversible victory. By the next morning, the tension in the office was electric. Nathan arrived, forcing a calm smile, but his hand shook slightly as he checked his phone for updates, glances constantly flicking toward me. Leadership had called an emergency session to review the project's history and accountability. I arrived prepared, folder in hand, every email, timestamp, approval, and note perfectly organized. Nathan tried to speak first, attempting to frame progress as on schedule, but I projected the master timeline, showing exactly where missteps occurred and where his claims contradicted documented reality. The room went silent. Colleagues leaned in, eyes shifting between him and the evidence. Nathan's jaw tightened, lips pressed thin, a subtle tremor revealing his panic. Every interruption he attempted was met with precise documentation, emails, and prior approvals, exposing mismanagement he thought invisible. Leadership asked questions. I answered calmly, showing facts, not emotion. Nathan tried to redirect blame, but the record was flawless, leaving no room for excuses. Colleagues exchanged quiet nods, subtle recognition of authority shifting. Midway, a senior manager asked Nathan for clarification on a critical decision, and he stammered, caught between the facts I displayed and his false narrative. By the end of the session, Nathan retreated to his office, door closed, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The office had shifted. Control had quietly and irrevocably moved. I updated the master timeline with every detail of his unraveling, each entry reinforcing his collapse and my rise. The long game was nearly complete. Nathan's arrogance had built the trap, and the payoff, the final, undeniable justice, was now unavoidable. By mid-afternoon, Nathan's fall was undeniable. Leadership requested a final review of all project communications, and he could not hide behind charm or misdirection. I presented the master timeline, every email, approval, and note perfectly sequenced, showing the cumulative errors and contradictions that had piled up over months. Nathan tried to intervene, his voice faltering, gestures tense, but each claim he made collided with the meticulously documented record I had built. Colleagues leaned in, subtle nods acknowledging the truth, whispers of realization traveling quietly across the room. Nathan's face flushed, jaw tight, eyes darting nervously between leadership and me, every hesitation recorded in my mental and written timeline. He sent frantic messages mid-meeting, trying to regain composure, but the evidence was unassailable. Every oversight he thought hidden, every misstep he assumed forgotten, now stood in black and white. Leadership asked him pointed questions. He stammered, fumbling explanations, revealing panic he could not conceal. I stayed calm, responding only with clarity, letting the facts speak. By late afternoon, whispers turned into quiet acknowledgement. Nathan was no longer in control. Emails once routed through him now came directly to me. Colleagues approached cautiously, asking questions they once dared not ask. Nathan retreated to his office, the door closing firmly behind him, leaving silence in his wake. I updated the master timeline one last time, every entry confirming his unraveling in my rise. The long game was complete. Months of patience, strategy, and methodical planning had delivered undeniable, irreversible justice, and I finally felt the calm satisfaction of triumph earned without confrontation, only truth. By the next morning, the office felt transformed. Nathan's absence was palpable. His chair remained empty, his name barely spoken, his authority erased without a single confrontation. Leadership formally reassigned project oversight to me, citing clarity, accuracy, and consistent documentation as the reason. Colleagues approached, hesitantly at first, then with quiet confidence, seeking guidance and subtly acknowledging the shift in power. I responded calmly, offering clarity without arrogance, letting competence and meticulous preparation speak louder than words. The project hummed under careful management. Deadlines were met, client satisfaction rose, and morale improved. I reviewed the master timeline one final time, confirming every email, note, and approval perfectly aligned to show my foresight in Nathan's repeated errors. No one needed to argue. No one needed to witness drama. The record spoke for itself. Weeks of methodical planning, patience, and strategic documentation had delivered victory that felt quiet but absolute. Nathan's downfall was complete, a result of his own arrogance and disregard for accountability. I walked through the office, noticing subtle nods, respectful glances, and hushed acknowledgement of authority earned, not demanded. For the first time in months, I smiled fully, freely, without doubt. I had survived being blamed, watched betrayal unfold, and turned it into undeniable proof of my competence. True power, I realized, was patience, precision, and resilience. I had not just survived, I had thrived quietly, methodically, and completely. The office was mine to lead, and I understood my worth, my influence, and my capacity to rise above anyone who underestimated me.